Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is a channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on and talk about some books. It's officially that time of year. We are finally at the end of June, which means it's time for the very much all over YouTube right now, mid-year freakout tag. Let's get straight in. I will list the questions down below if you want to do this yourself, so do come and let me know in the comments down below your answers to all of these questions because I would be really intrigued. Maybe I'll grab a couple of recommendations out of your list. I don't know, it would be fun to make a video where I compile all your recommendations and read some of those from this. But anyway, let's crack straight in with question number one, which is what is my best book so far this year? Now that feels practically impossible for me to answer. So what I've done is I've kind of cheated and I've given you my best 4 books that all exist within a different sphere. So let's talk about those 4 books. It's safe to assume that I gave all of these books 5 stars, and the first one is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This is a sort of reimagining of a true story about a woman in Iceland who I think was the last woman to ever be executed in Iceland for, I think, the murder of someone that she knew. And it's all about how this woman is fostered by another family in the lead up to her execution and the connections that she makes with them as they slowly begin to look past the prejudice they had when she first arrived, obviously because she is a murderess and she's infamous in this town. And they really start to build a relationship with her in this beautiful way. And I mean, this book for me was outstanding. I thought it was beautifully constructed. I thought it was heartbreaking. It was one of those books where you know how it's going to end, but you still hope and pray that they're going to find a way out. And they do try everything that they can to stop the sort of end result from happening. And the way the family connects to her is just beautiful. The way they're willing to risk everything for her is really beautiful and heartbreaking. So this is the first book that is just an absolute standout for me so far this year. Second in the best book of the year prompt is of course a recent read, In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. I was so lucky to see this author live, which made my experience of reading this book so much more intense because I got to see her answer questions about the book and get a bit more context about how the book was created and her writing process and her research and everything, and it just made the whole reading experience so much more immersive. But essentially what this book is about is it follows 2 young men, Henry Gaunt and Sidney Elwood, who met in high school. They're sort of aristocratic men, I guess, in the lead up to the First World War. And then because of some anti-German sentiment against his mother, Henry Gaunt signs up for the war and naturally faces all the horrors that you would expect that they went through in World War I. And he takes you through all of that and how he changes. But all this time he's writing letters back to his beloved friend, Sidney Elwood. And Sidney's providing this really beautiful escape, I guess, from the war for Henry until he decides to enlist himself. And the boys have to deal with not only the everyday occurrence of loss and the potential of losing each other, but also the fact that they are madly in love with each other. Neither of them are really willing to open up to the other one about it, and also they are really scared of the potential consequences of acting on their love for each other because they could be court-martialed, they could be executed, they could face so much homophobic sentiment from the men that they are fighting alongside. And it's honestly such a beautiful story about their romance in the place of so much chaos and loss, all the connections that they make with other people, the separation of how they end up all over the place separate to each other throughout the war and then coming back together. And it's this beautiful story about grief and loss and heartbreak, but also about love, first love, enduring love. It's just beautiful. I loved this book and it made me sob at the end because it has this beautiful, hopeful ending that's kind of like shattered to pieces in one page. Next up for the third slot for best book of the year so far, I had to of course mention the book that frankly everybody's been raving about, at least on Book Talk at the moment, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I just recently finished reading this as well and was absolutely gobsmacked by how immersed I was in this story, how much I loved it, how much it feels like it's truly written for the girlies who loved Divergent and the Hunger Games and everything back in the day and were just looking for exactly that to like reminisce on and enjoy, but with a little bit more spice and dragons. It's just so much about this reminds me of those books, but it's so much better because it's like it's grown with its audience. But anyway, as for what it's about, you're following the main character, Violet, who has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I am probably butchering the pronunciation of. And what this essentially means is that her bones and joints are particularly brittle and she's considered particularly fragile by everyone in her society. She's been training all her life to become a scribe as part of the kingdom that she's in, until one day her mother sits her down and says, actually, no, you're going to be joining the very risky, very life-threatening Riders Quadrant because there isn't a single person in our family who hasn't been a rider. So from that moment on, everything in Violet's life is thrown into absolute chaos. Everything is a 50-50 chance between life and death. And frankly, it leans a lot more towards death more often than it does life for her. Through the various life-threatening situations she's put in, she makes beautiful, beautiful friendships. She rediscovers friendships from the past and reanalyzes whether or not they're healthy now. And she has a lovely, lovely enemies to lovers romance in here with a character named Zayden, which was just absolutely swoon-worthy. Their commitment to each other, but also the fact that he was willing to just like let her go and do her thing and he would just be there for her if she needed him, was just everything. He wasn't overprotective. He was like, bitch, I know you're strong, fight your own battles and I'll be here if you need me, just let me know. I thought that was just incredible, especially because it was juxtaposed against like this character of Dane, who is like, no, don't do anything, I need to protect you, like don't fight, I need to fight for you. It was great. But anyway, I love this book. I thought it was so immersive. I love the dragons. I thought they were so fun because they just didn't understand the social prejudices against different people in different communities. It was just amazing seeing the dragons just not care about people's backgrounds and where they came from, so long as they were a worthwhile person to have in the wing. All in all, loved this book. And the last book that fits into Best Book of the Year is, of course, Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the sequel to Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and it follows Astrid Parker, who after her life basically imploded at the end of the first book, she's offered the opportunity of a lifetime basically to come onto a sort of interior design show and redecorate, redesign, or reconstruct this old inn in her town with the help of the family, particularly the daughter or granddaughter, I think, of the person who owns the inn, Jordan, who is the carpenter on this project. Astrid and Jordan immediately do not get off to a good start, and the showrunners notice the tension between them and decide that it might be a bit of fun if they played that up. It would make for good TV. So the two of them play that up, but eventually sparks fly. That hatred turns into a lot more like love, and the relationship that is formed is just beautiful. I love this sapphic romance. I love how you get so much time with the characters individually, learning who they are and the struggles and why they're in the position that they're in before you see them start to form this relationship together. And I absolutely adored the fact that the relationship third act conflict that you always get in romance books like this, it wasn't anything that either of the characters had really done wrong. They were just doing everything they could to try and protect each other and be there for each other. It was more a case of their lives just kind of split off into these disparate paths. They needed to deal with those sorts of things on their own before they could come back together and figure out how they would fit into each other's lives again. And it was just beautiful. I love the way they supported each other through career growth, even if it meant that one of them had to sacrifice because they knew it was what that person needed. It was everything that I needed from this book. So that is the last book in my list of best books of the year. Let's move on to the second prompt, which is best sequel of the year so far, and that would have to be The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I just read this recently, and yes, I did only give this 4 stars, but I thought it was absolutely stand out. It was the sequel to Gilead and The Handmaid's Tale and everything that I didn't even know I needed. If you don't know what this is about, it follows almost directly on from The Handmaid's Tale, right after the character in The Handmaid's Tale has kind of escaped with her life and with her child. And it follows 3 main women. So you've got Aunt Lydia, who is very, very infamous in The Handmaid's Tale as being like very strict, very much like a dictator within the sort of handmaids society. She ran the institution, I guess, that would train these handmaids how to be handmaids. And then you've got 2 young women named Jasmine and Nicole, who Jasmine, I think, has come from a fairly upstanding society, but then has been forced into the aunt's way of life, I guess, by a stream of circumstances that meant that she would have to marry someone she absolutely hated and would potentially end up dying as a result of this marriage. So to avoid it, she became an aunt. And then you've got Nicole, who lives outside of Gilead, but comes into Gilead in order to try and break it apart from the inside as part of this mission that people from the outside are organizing because they want to essentially see Gilead fall. And watching the way these three women and their lives intersect is really, really beautiful. This map of just discoveries between the three of them and connections between the three of them are just so intricately woven, and the writing of this book is incredible. I love the way it gives backstory to the character of Aunt Lydia, and you see how she became who she was and how she's reflecting back on all of that and deciding to change who she is because she isn't who she used to be. She isn't who she wanted to be before all of this happened, before she was forced to become Aunt Lydia. And all the machinations and all the schemes and everything that she's putting in place to help the destruction of Gilead are just incredible. So I would 100% recommend this book to anyone who's read The Handmaid's Tale and wants to see how this world just crumbles within itself when three strong women decide that they are not having it anymore. Next up, we've got a new release that I haven't read yet but really, really want to, and for me this is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This only just came out a couple of weeks ago, I think, and it's the third book in the sort of STEMinist series by this author. So you've got The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and then Love Theoretically, and they essentially all follow one woman who works within the STEM world and deals with all the prejudice and everything that comes alongside that, because this is a very male-dominated career path, and it follows them falling in love with someone in that world and sort of struggling with trying to be their own person, trying to be a feminist in this world, and also really just finding the man of their dreams and falling in love. So in this case, I'm going to read you the blurb to tell you what this particular one is about, and it says, "The many lives of theoretical physicist Elsie Hanaway have finally caught up with her. By day, she's an adjunct professor toiling away at grading labs and teaching thermodynamics in the hopes of landing tenure. By other day, Elsie makes up for her non-existent paycheck by offering her services as a fake girlfriend, tapping into her expertly honed people-pleasing skills to embody whichever version of herself the client needs. Honestly, it's a pretty sweet gig, until her carefully constructed Elsieverse comes crashing down, because Jack Smith, the annoyingly attractive and arrogant older brother of her favorite client, turns out to be the cold-hearted experimental physicist who ruined her mentor's career and undermined the reputation of theorists everywhere. And he's the same Jack Smith who rules over the physics department at MIT, standing right between Elsie and her dream job. Elsie is prepared for an all-out war of scholarly sabotage, but those long penetrating looks, not having to be anything other than her true self when she's with him, will falling into an experimentalist's orbit finally tempt her to put her most guarded theories on love into practice. I mean, I just love the sort of hate to love that is totally going to be happening in this book. Next up, we've got the most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and for me there are two books that fit into this category. So first, we've got I Am Flame by Rebecca Yarros, which is the sequel to Fourth Wing. I've obviously told you about Fourth Wing, so no need to say what this is about other than it's the sequel, and I am so keen. It comes out, I think, in November. And then we've got House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas, which I think comes out in November as well, although it could be coming out January next year, so in that case, ignore this book. But either way, I am super keen for that one as well. It's the third book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J Maas. And I mean, after how the second book ended, I am just amazed by how all those worlds are going to connect and everything's just going to link together, and I'm floored by it, and I want to know how it's going to play out. So those are the two books that I am most looking forward to in the next half of the year. Then we've got biggest disappointment of the year, and for me this was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I even got the special edition of it, which I'm so mad at myself for getting, because all in all, I thought it was decent, I thought it was fun, but I thought it was really a regurgitation of a few of Emily Henry's other books, particularly People We Meet on Vacation. There was just a lot about that book that seemed a lot like this book, and I think that meant that I wasn't able to enjoy this because it was just entirely too predictable, because it felt like it had all been written before. But essentially this follows a couple, Harriet and Wynne, who are seen by their friends as the perfect couple, except for the fact that they are not a couple anymore. They broke off their engagement but didn't tell any of their friends about it, and then all of a sudden their friends invite them as a big surprise on this last vacation to the sort of lake house, I guess, that they had been on so many vacations before with them, and it's just the, you know, the place that makes them all happy. It's their happy place. Their friends surprise them by inviting them both on this vacation to celebrate a very big bomb dropped by one of them. And so in order to not disrupt the festivities, Harriet and Wynne decide that they are going to pretend to be still engaged to each other. It's a lot of one bed trope, it's a lot of second chance romance, there's a little bit of hate to love in there as well, and honestly it just felt a lot like People We Meet on Vacation. So That's why this is my biggest disappointment of the year. And my biggest surprise of the year was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And I feel kind of bad for saying that the reason why it's my biggest surprise is because I genuinely didn't expect to enjoy this, because everybody says Colleen Hoover is an overhyped author. And so I was like, oh, okay, so I probably won't like this because maybe it's just the hype that makes everyone love this. But no, I loved this book. It essentially follows our main character Lily, who on the evening after, I think, the funeral of her father, who she had a very, very toxic relationship with because he was abusive to her mother as she was growing up, she stumbles across a man on a rooftop named Ryle, and they're just about to have a one-night stand, a fling, until Ryle is called away, and Lily brushes the whole thing off as a missed opportunity. I think a few months later, she then is opening up her own flower shop and she bumps into Ryle once again, and they start off a whirlwind romance where everything moves super quickly. Simultaneously though, Lily is going back through her old journals and going back through her old letters and finding journals and letters written to Ellen DeGeneres about a young boy named Atlas, a homeless boy named Atlas, who she fell in love with when they were like 15, 16 years old, and she's reliving that romance all over again until one day Atlas reappears in the present time and she's forced to deal with Ryle and the situation blooming there, and then Atlas and this love that she remembered from back in the day that was just so sweet and so wholesome. This book honestly hurt me so much because of everything that she deals with Ryle. It's one of those things where if you don't know what's going to happen going into the book, you can so easily fall for that character and then have to do this complete 180 once you get about halfway through and you realize that things are not what they seem. It is not a healthy relationship, and you begin to root so heavily for Atlas. It's worth saying that if you are interested in reading this book, you should check out the trigger warnings for things like domestic abuse, domestic violence, because it does obviously deal with those issues and it deals with them really matter-of-factly and it really confronts them. So it's really worth checking that out if that's not something that you are able to read. But all in all, I would recommend reading this and just ignore everyone that says Colleen Hoover is just about the hype, because she's not. She's an amazing writer and I loved this book. For fave new author, as you probably expect, I couldn't narrow it down to one, so I've got two. So first, we've got Rebecca Yarros, the author of Fourth Wing, for obvious reasons that I've obviously discussed. And second, we've got the author Alice Wynne of In Memoriam, because again, obvious reasons, discussed why I love both of these books. They are just incredible and the writing was amazing, and yeah, love these authors now. For a book that made me cry, In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, I was sobbing by the end of this book. I think I've got a vlog even where I've literally recorded me finishing this book and how I just descend into tears because it was just insane. I think it will have come out by now. If not, it'll be coming out very soon, so do keep an eye out for that if you want to see me bawling my eyes out by the ending of this book. I mean, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. It destroyed me. Now a book that made me happy. It feels kind of weird to say this about this book considering it is a murder mystery, but the book is The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. And the reason why this book makes me so happy is because of the characters that you're following. They're just such a close-knit group. They're like a family, and their relationship to each other is so beautiful. Their lust for life is so beautiful. The relationships that they form with the police are so beautiful. It's just everything about this story just makes me happy. The comedy of the story makes me happy. It's amazing. It's the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series, which essentially follows 4 elderly people who are living in a retirement home, and they've created this group called the Thursday Murder Club where they meet every Thursday to solve cold cases until some very real, very current cases start showing up on their doorstep. Dead bodies are found on the grounds where they live, and they decide that they're going to work together to bamboozle the cops and solve these cases first. I would really recommend reading this series. It's so wholesome. Then we've got the most beautiful book that I bought in this first half of the year, and that would have to be Cursed Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. This is the sequel to Twin Crowns, and I mean, just look at it. It's stunning. I love the light that splits between the middle. I love that they're holding hands. The 2 women on the cover are gorgeous. I just think this is a beautiful cover. As for what this is about, it follows these 2 twins who were separated at birth. One of them knows of the other's existence and the other one doesn't. The one that knows of the other's existence was brought up by the witches that have been exiled from the kingdom and persecuted throughout their entire lives, basically, by the king in power. And then you've got the princess who doesn't know of her twin's existence and has been raised by the regent, I guess, in order to take over the crown, only to find out that everyone that she's surrounded herself with are essentially trying to betray her and steal the power from her. The princess basically gets kidnapped so that her sister can take her place. That's when she finds out she has a sister, and watching them sort of come to terms with each other's worlds is really, really interesting. And then they have various romances in their sort of new communities that open their eyes and make the sort of black and white vision of the world a lot more gray, and I just loved it. So yeah, this is the sequel, which I'm super, super keen to get to soon. I think it's just a duology, so I cannot wait to finish this off, take it off my series list, and see how these romances develop. And lastly, we've got question number 11, which is, what is a book that I still need to read? The answer to this is all of them, but if we were to simplify it right down to a book that's definitely very high on my priority list for the second half of the year, it would have to be The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber, which is the sequel to Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is a series that continues on from the Caraval series by this author. And it follows Evangeline, who, after finding out that the boy that she loves is set to marry another, she makes a deal with the Prince of Hearts, Jax, who you meet in the Caraval series towards the end, to stop the wedding from happening. And the deal is that he'll stop the wedding and she owes him 3 kisses. After their first kiss, Evangeline realizes there is a lot more power behind these kisses than she ever realized, and she begins to really come to terms with the fact that she's made a deal with a very, very dangerous man. But of course, I love Jax. I think he's an amazing character. I think he's a little bit of a cinnamon bun on the inside, and I'm really, really hoping for a romance between these two by the end of this series. So I really need to crack into this book and see how it develops. I'm probably going to do a video at some point soon where I reread Once Upon a Broken Heart and I start and finish this one, so look out for that one. Let me know if it's something you're interested in. So that is the end of my mid-year freakout tag. As I said at the beginning of the video, let me know what your answers to some of these questions are as well. I've included the questions in the comment box down below, so you can go through those, paste them into your comments, and let me know what the books you are most excited for are, and what ones you have loved, what ones have disappointed you, all that kind of thing. Do come and chat to me in the comments down below. I love talking to you guys, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It's a super, super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!